Who was really to blame for the 9/11's attacks? A question that has sparked countless debates, discussions, and theories over the past 2 decades. Was it solely the work of 19 men affiliated with Al-Qaeda, or were there more sinister forces at play? Stay with us as we delve into the events of that fateful day. September 11th, 2001, started just like any other day. The hustle and bustle of New York City were in full swing as people rushed off to work, children to school, and tourists to the iconic landmarks that dotted the city's skyline. But within a few hours, the ordinary day turned into one of extraordinary horror, forever etching the date into the annals of history as a day of unspeakable tragedy. On this fateful day, 19 men affiliated with the extremist group Al-Qaeda executed a meticulously planned attack that would shake the United States and the world to its core. 4 domestic flights were hijacked mid-air, their unsuspecting passengers and crew thrust into the middle of a nightmare they could never have imagined. 2 of these flights, American Airlines Flight 11 and United Airlines Flight 175, were flown into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. The impact and resulting fires led to the horrific collapse of these iconic structures, turning them into a towering inferno and then a pile of rubble and dust. Meanwhile, American Airlines Flight 77 was flown into the Pentagon in Virginia, causing massive destruction and loss of life. But it was the actions aboard the 4th flight, United Flight 93, that highlighted the indomitable spirit of humanity. The passengers, realizing their flight had been hijacked and learning of the fate of the other flights, staged a heroic revolt. They fought back, ultimately causing the plane to crash in a field in Pennsylvania, far from its intended target, the U.S. Capitol. Their bravery undoubtedly saved many lives, and their actions will forever be remembered for their courage and selflessness. In a span of just a few hours, nearly 3,000 people lost their lives. The attacks left a deep scar on the heart of America and the world, a painful reminder of the senseless loss of life and the destructive power of hatred and extremism. The world watched in horror as the deadliest terrorist attacks in U.S. history unfolded. As the dust settled and the magnitude of the tragedy became apparent, one question echoed in the minds of millions. Who was really to blame for the 9/11's attacks? 19 men, one mission, a world changed forever. These 19 men weren't just ordinary individuals. They were operatives, soldiers in a war they believed was right. They were affiliates of an extremist group known as Al-Qaeda, and on the fateful day of September 11, 2001, they carried out what would become the deadliest terrorist attacks in U.S. history. These men hijacked 4 domestic flights, their targets, the World Trade Center's Twin Towers in New York City, the Pentagon in Virginia, and a field in Pennsylvania. Their actions led to the horrific collapse of the Twin Towers and the loss of nearly 3,000 lives. But behind these men, who were the puppeteers pulling the strings? Who was the mastermind that orchestrated this day of terror? Meet Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the alleged brains behind the operation, a name that has become synonymous with the atrocities of that day. He's been labeled as the architect, the main instigator, the one who set the wheels of terror in motion. But it's been over 2 decades since the attacks, and justice is a long and winding road. After 27 months of negotiations, the U.S. has finally reached a plea deal with Mohammed and 2 other defendants. The death penalty is off the table, replaced with guilty pleas to all charges. A sentencing hearing is to follow, marking another chapter in this ongoing saga of retribution and accountability. But this story, steeped in tragedy and stained with the blood of the innocent, raises many questions. Were these men the only ones to blame? Was there a larger, more sinister force at play? And most importantly, does this plea deal truly signify the end of the pursuit for justice? Or is it just another twist in a tale that's far from over? But is the story really as straightforward as it seems? The blame seemed clear. Or was it? Let's delve deeper into this tangled web of culpability. On the surface, it's straightforward. The 9/11's attacks were carried out by 19 men, hijackers belonging to the extremist group Al-Qaeda. Their leader, none other than Osama bin Laden, claimed responsibility for these horrific acts. But there's always more to the story, isn't there? Enter Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, often dubbed as the architect of the 9/11's attacks. This man, now in custody after a plea deal, was instrumental in planning and coordinating the attacks. His intricate web of connections and the meticulous orchestration of the attacks point to a larger, more sinister network at play, but the blame doesn't stop there. we must consider the role of state sponsorship in these attacks. This is where the situation gets murky. Some argue that certain states may have indirectly supported these attacks by providing funding, shelter, and ideological backing to Al-Qaeda. In particular, the role of Saudi Arabia has been a topic of heated debate. Though the Saudi government has consistently denied any involvement, several reports suggest that certain individuals within the country may have had connections with the attackers. The families of the victims have been seeking more information about this possible link. However, despite their pleas, definitive answers remain elusive. Then there's the question of the United States' own role in the attacks. No, we're not talking about conspiracy theories, we're referring to the potential failures in intelligence and security measures that may have allowed these attacks to occur. Could the attacks have been prevented if the warning signs had been accurately interpreted and acted upon? It's a question that continues to haunt many. And finally, we must reflect on the role of societal and global factors. The rise of extremism, socioeconomic disparities, political instability, these broader issues can often fuel the fires of terrorism. So, in a way, could we all be indirectly to blame for creating an environment where such attacks can take place? The question of blame is not as simple as pointing to the perpetrators. It's a complex web of direct and indirect factors, individual and collective responsibilities. The blame game is a convoluted one, and seeking definitive answers may be an ongoing pursuit. Perhaps the focus should be less on assigning blame and more on understanding these complexities to prevent such tragedies in the future. The dust settled, but the world was never the same. The aftermath of the 9/11 attacks was a turning point in modern history, setting off a chain of events that would drastically transform the global landscape. The United States, shocked and mourning, was quick to respond. The War on Terror was launched, a campaign led by the United States and its allies to dismantle Al-Qaeda and other militant organizations. This war took the American military to the rugged terrains of Afghanistan and the deserts of Iraq, stirring up a storm of controversy and debate. The goal was clear: to prevent another tragedy like 9/11's from ever happening again. Yet the methods used and the cost in human lives remain points of contention to this day. In the homeland, the attacks prompted a significant restructuring of the government. The Department of Homeland Security was created, consolidating 22 federal agencies under one roof. The aim was to streamline and strengthen America's defenses. This overhaul, however, came with its own challenges as the country grappled with striking a balance between security and individual freedoms. The impact on civil liberties in the United States was profound. The Patriot Act, passed shortly after the attacks, expanded the government's surveillance capabilities in an effort to detect and prevent terrorism. However, this raised concerns about potential overreach and infringement on the privacy rights of ordinary citizens. The tension between national security and personal freedom is an ongoing debate that was sharply brought into focus by the events of 9/11. The aftermath of 9/11 is not just about policy changes and military campaigns. It's about the lives lost, the families left in mourning, the heroes who emerged, and the resilience demonstrated by a nation in the face of adversity. It's about the collective memory of a day that shook the world, and the lessons we've learned since. The echoes of 9/11 continue to reverberate in our world today. The past is a mirror to the future, and as we look back, we must also look forward, striving to build a world that is safer, more united, and more understanding. So who was really to blame for the 9/11 attacks? We've journeyed through the painful memories of that fateful day, scrutinized the perpetrators who carried out the horrific acts, and grappled with the tangled web of blame. We've seen how the aftermath of these attacks has reshaped our world and how the victims and their families continue to seek justice and closure. The question of blame is not a simple one. It extends beyond the 19 men who carried out the attacks, beyond Al-Qaeda, and into the intricate maze of international politics and intelligence failures. As we've discovered, the quest for accountability is still ongoing, as is our understanding of the events leading up to that tragic day. The truth may be more complex than we can ever fully understand.